It's actually a pretty common belief that autism is being dangerously overdiagnosed, and people are getting their diagnoses just like, you get a diagnosis, and you get a diagnosis, and you all get a diagnosis! And people take this belief and think, if autism equals overdiagnosed, then you equals lying. It's basic maths. So here's how to deal with that. Hi everyone, if you're new to my channel, I am Sam. I was diagnosed with autism in 2019 and I now make videos on autism and neurodiversity, exploring the autistic experience, that sort of thing, here on YouTube every single week. If you think you might like that kind of thing, please click subscribe and the little bell button to be notified every time I post a video. So let's talk about people not believing you, even when you have a diagnosis, even when you have a card. Hell, I have a card. I am a card-carrying autistic. I think the most important thing that you need to remember is it's not you, it's them. If you have received an autism diagnosis and you're pretty sure that they got it right, you feel like it explains a lot about your life, when people don't believe you, instead of thinking about yourself and like, why don't they see it in me, shift the focus from you to them. Ultimately, what do they even know about autism? Is their opinion actually valid? And this can be a tough one to answer, but I've worked with autistic kids does not make someone an expert in identifying autism in adults. I've worked with real autistic adults in residential care equally does not make someone an expert on autistic adults with lower support needs. It happens to me as well. Quite soon after my diagnosis, an acquaintance of my father's who is a cardiologist or something, watched one of my videos and said to my dad,
"Oh, she's not autistic."
And it's just like, first of all, you're a freaking cardiologist, stay in your lane. And this kind of thing is hard because obviously he has a medical degree. I don't know how much they actually learn about autism in a medical degree, probably less than a term. But I kind of still get the impression that my dad doubts my diagnosis because of what this guy, who's got no idea what he's talking about, said to him. But, you know, it really hurts. And even if people don't say anything, you can still kind of hear them thinking it a lot of the time. And being doubted on something like this, a diagnosis that you've probably spent a long time waiting for, and it's not just like you walk in the door and get one, you know, it's hours of interviews and questionnaires, and like it's a very intense process. So going through all of that and getting your diagnosis and then having people not believe you is just like a complete invalidation of yourself. Just remember that people with ignorant opinions about autism are like assholes. No, that's it, that's the punchline. So people like this ignorant cardiologist, they can get in the sea, but what about the people around you? The people that you can't just say, oh, well, it doesn't matter, they're not going to see me again, I've never even met them. You know, what about the people close to you? And you can't really escape them. Severing ties is a very extreme approach to this problem. I wouldn't recommend it. But I'm kind of the perhaps painfully naive opinion that the slowly catchy monkey method does actually work with most people, especially most neurotypicals. Which is why actually it's been a conscious action not to be a very shouty kind of person on this channel, because I don't think it's a very effective way to change people's minds, because people get defensive very easily. Yeah, it turns out people don't like being called stupid. Ultimately, this is about winning hearts and minds, changing people's opinion, and it's not necessarily changing people's opinion of you. Most of the time, I would say it's changing people's opinion about what autism actually is and how it looks like in actually autistic adults. When I'm talking to people of a certain generation, and let's face it, I think that this is in part a generational problem because millennials and younger, typically there's been a lot more discourse about mental health in general, there's less of a stigma, and people don't have so many years of kind of like this stereotype built up within them. So when we're talking with people of like an older generation, like the boomers for example, I always like to bring up Anthony Hopkins because, first of all, he's very famous and most people have heard of him. And he was also diagnosed in his 70s. And so that just goes to show that, you know, you can be diagnosed at any age in your life and it doesn't make you less autistic. So he kind of adds this air of credibility to this sort of non-believing fictional boomer that I've invented in my head. Not my dad. People of my parents' generation have heard of him. He is an actor who obviously is good at masking, he's good at acting, who doesn't look autistic. Honestly, he just seems like kind of a super nice guy, and I actually follow him on Instagram because he's an amazing artist, and his Instagram is just like really super chill, beautiful vibes, so I would check it out. Why am I plugging him? He should be plugging me. But what this is doing is giving somebody a soft in to the world of autism. So if people have very negative stereotypes about autistic people, you know, they think of it very much like a disorder, a disability, they don't associate you with that. And so what you have to do is you have to kind of show them that autism is not about kind of like just permanent suffering. Well, maybe depending on the day, but you know, it's not about this permanent state of tragedy and misery. You know, autistic people can live fulfilled lives. We're just a little bit different. Using examples like Anthony Hopkins bridges between what they think they know about autism and, hey look, this guy that you probably trust and recognize has been diagnosed, therefore autism might not be what you think it is. And if you can find similar examples to this that involves giving people little snippets, it's kind of like a snippet approach, because you're not slamming neurotribes down on the table and expecting them to read the whole book, which it's a big book. You can't just give people this overwhelming amount of information and expect them to be like, oh, well, my mind has changed. That's not how people work, because most people don't read as well. But I also want to mention the fact, especially when you're dealing with family, that a lot of people won't believe your autism diagnosis, because when you talk about your autistic traits, they are traits that they themselves might have. And so you end up with these frustrating conversations where you say, well, I really struggle with this, and they go, well, we all do that. And actually, we don't all do that. That is an autistic trait, but it has become normalized within the smaller family group, perhaps. So my theory is that a lot of people who doubt you actually do so because they have a lot of autistic traits, and maybe they just don't want to recognize something in themselves. It's not all the people who doubt you for sure, but I know that there is like a little bit of a pattern there. Especially if they've been undiagnosed for many decades and have just struggled through life, and so have built up this mentality that that's just the way of the world, life is a struggle, this is how it's supposed to be, you know, get over yourself. But I think that when you have struggled being an undiagnosed neurodivergent person, it just seems like, well, of course life is like that. What are you talking about? You know, and you've completely normalized this sense of otherness from the world. You're like, well, that is how it is. So now I want to talk about the people who think that only the most disabling kind of autism is real autism.
Real autism.
In their heads, real autism equals somebody who can't talk, somebody who maybe has a comorbid learning disability, who cannot live independently and has violent outbursts. And anything less than that is, in their eyes,
not real autism.
Actually, I think this is a point that I might have to do a full video on, because it's a very widely held belief. But this is harder to argue with because they start from a point which is true, in that there are autistic people who cannot live independently, who cannot speak, and who need, you know, round-the-clock care to deal with their autism, although most of the time that involves some kind of a comorbidity, whether it's a learning disability or epilepsy or whatever. But, you know, we talk about autism being a spectrum, and I think it is kind of like wildly misunderstood what a spectrum actually is. You know, most people think, well, that means that you start mildly and then you get progressively more autistic, and then you have the severe end of the spectrum. It's like end of the spectrum. That's not really how spectrums work, but whatever. All autism kind of starts at spicy anyway, doesn't it? But there are a couple of different ways of explaining the autistic spectrum. I've linked a few resources down below that I think also do a great job of explaining it. But what I like to think of is, you know, those mixing boards that DJs have. You know, there's like sliders, there's knobs, there's all twinkly lights and everything. Things are on or off and up and down. And it's just a delicate combination of using all those functions and, like, you know, creating music out of it. So each autistic person has a different setting for their different song. So it's like, you know, that slider is sometimes up and sometimes down. But that is kind of like the metaphor for autistic people in our daily lives. And in this analogy, a neurotypical person might have their experience set to standard, or auto-tune if you're feeling spicy. So think about it this way, you wouldn't go up to a DJ working on his mix board. I don't know what they're called, mix board, what is this? You wouldn't go up to a DJ working on this and be like, so how loud is the music you make? Like, how loud is it? Is it like quiet music or is it loud music? Like, and that's what you're saying when you're saying, well, how autistic are you? Are you mildly autistic or are you like really badly autistic? Although most people don't actually ask you that because they assume talking to you that you have to be mildly autistic. So you wouldn't ask a DJ, how loud is your music? Because you would ask them things like, what kind of music do you play? What is your creative process maybe? I don't know, what would you ask a DJ? I'm not sure. I want to make a point that this is all very hard work. It's hard work to constantly educate people around you. I'm afraid that I don't have a better solution for this than the people who are capable doing the work when they can. I mean, I literally started this YouTube channel because I didn't want to have the same conversations with people over and over again. And the trouble is, you can send people articles or books or whatever, but you can't make them read them. And that's also another reason why I started a YouTube channel, even though I'm probably more of a writer, because people don't really read. If something's on the internet, people will skim read. People don't read. And that's weird because apart from the fact that when my ADHD symptoms get really bad and I can't read, I actually do really like reading. So it amazes me that there are people who just don't on an everyday basis. So people like to watch videos, even though I can get a little verbose at times, and you think, Sam, maybe you should have written a book on this instead of doing a 25-minute video on trauma. No, I'm just kidding, you guys like that. But you know, like, even the longer videos, people are far more likely to sit down and watch them. And when you have short videos, people will share them. And that is kind of like why I decided to create this kind of content, actually. So supporting creators who make content, whether it's podcasts or videos like this, or blogs or cartoons, comics, that kind of stuff, is really important. And this is sounding a little bit more self-serving than I meant it to. I don't just mean like, oh, everybody come and support me. But in the world of social media, engagement pushes algorithms, and engagement increases visibility. And so every time you're engaging on any creator's post, you are furthering the cause of neurodiversity, if you like. You know, you are pushing autism into the mainstream. The neurodiversity movement is actually decades behind the gay rights movement. Imagine how many neurodivergent people there are in arts and entertainment, perhaps. Like in music, in acting, in all of these kind of creative things. There are loads of them. But how many people could you actually name who are out? Okay, we've talked about Anthony Hopkins. There's like a handful of actors, reasonably famous, but I think that if you really looked into it, there would be a load more people that a lot of people have heard of who are actually autistic. But remember that this is a movement that we're living in. We're not living in a perfect world where people understand autism, even though we might be able to see it's so obvious. Other people just don't know that much about it. And so education is really at the forefront of how I believe that we can start to make a difference. We are starting to break into the mainstream awareness, but we're not there yet. We're still kind of at the point where when you talk to someone and I say, oh, I do a YouTube channel about autism, they go, oh, my nephew's autistic or something like that. You know, like people are aware of it. The stigma is starting to go. But to break into the mainstream, what we have to do is we have to make it accessible and digestible to the broader neurotypical audience as well as the autistic audience. Also, I just think that the reason that autistic people suffer is because people don't know about autism. And so if we can change that, that is the key. And that is why I've brought up this point about sharing creators, because there are so many people doing amazing work and their work is not getting the visibility that it deserves. So yeah. You could share this video, you could like this video too. Whenever you see a piece of content that really resonates with you, engage with it, even if you have to create like an anonymous account, a social media account, so you can do more sharing if you're not ready to be out yet. Once we reach a tipping point, we won't all have to do this intensely tiring emotional labor for ourselves, because the times, they are a-changing. Thanks so much to Annette for commissioning this video. I thought it was a really great topic and I hope you liked the video. I'll see you next time, bye.